You guys want to catch fish like this at the docks using micro jigs? I'm going to show you guys how. Stay tuned. Oos. Today we're going to talk about how to fish slow death jigs, specifically at the docks. Now there's so many different sizes and types, and everybody wants to know how we fish them exactly. You can fish them deep. You can fish them, 40 feet deep, 30 feet deep. You can do the 130 in deep ocean with different gear, but today we're going to do laser focus specific at the docks with 20-gram jigs. Now if you guys remember the very first video I did, I started talking about micro jigs. Since then we've made our own jigs, the Slow Death Jigs, and one of the things people always ask me is, how do you fish these? How do you fish them specifically? So today we're really going to nail down how to fish the 20-gram jig at the docks. We're going to talk about the gear, then I'm going to take you guys out on the water, show you exactly how I fish them, and then we're going to come back and talk about jigs, jig theory, and everything you need to know about the jigs themselves. Now my first video, you remember, these are what I talked about. I was using a bait caster or conventional reels, and I've actually gotten away with these. So one of the reasons I got away from the bait caster is there's actual, mechanical interference when this thing spins. When we're just talking 20 grams specifically. So when the line, I want the line coming off of the bail as quickly as possible. So the spool itself, it has, there's 2 pins in here. It doesn't go as fast. When the reel's new or once you've serviced it, they seem to do really well, but then after a while, they just don't seem to keep up. They get gummed up. It just doesn't really spin as freely as it should for the 20 gram and lighter. But I've gone actually to light spinning reels. So the advantage to a light spinning reel, and one of the keys is you want to get it as small as possible, because there's nothing that spins on this. So when the line's coming off, it just pops off of the reel. There's nothing spinning. There's no mechanical action in the reel itself. So you get a lot better action from the jig because there's no mechanical interference. It's just coming off the bail. And of course you want as small as possible. I would say 2,500 or less. This is a 1,000 size. I use 2,500 or some 1,000 size reels. Again, we're going with the size. The smaller you get, the less circumference it has to go around for the line to come off. So you don't want to be using a 4,000 size spinning reel, 3,000 size. Try to keep it small. The next we're going to talk about braided line. Now the key here is actually to use the thinnest line possible. Here in America, everything we do is pound test, 15 pound test, 10 pound test. Everybody wants to know what pound test you're using. When you're talking about jigging, you're going to hear the term PE. PE just stands for polyethylene. We call it braid, but in Japan and the rest of the world it's referred to as PE. And it's basically denoted as size. You'll see PE 0.6, PE 1.2, PE 2, PE 4. And really all they're talking about is the size of the actual line. And that's really what's important. When it comes to jigging, we're not so concerned with what the actual pound is. Size of the line and diameter is key. So you want a braided line that has as many carriers as possible, or as many separate strands that make up the single line. So I would go X8 is probably the minimum. That just basically means there's 8 separate lines making up the single strand. I've got some 12 strand stuff that I imported. I would probably recommend going with the Berkeley X9. It's really readily available in America, and it's got 9 carriers or 9 separate lines that make up the single line. Now the key to that is the more lines you have, the rounder the line becomes. So if you've got, 5 separate strands making up the one braid as opposed to 8, 9, or 12, the more lines you have making up the single cord of braid, the smoother it is and the thinner it becomes. And that's ultimately key. You want that thing slicing through the water. As you get deeper, it's a lot more important than it is at the dock, but just something to keep in mind. Go with the thin line, go with the X9 or thinner. The second part of the line equation is monofilament. A lot of people are using fluorocarbon out there. It's not really necessary. Mono has better knot strength, and it's a lot more abrasion resistant. The abrasion resistance is really what you want. Fishing around the pilings, the fish get tangled up in the line, especially when you're vertical fishing. You're looking for a reaction bite, so I'm not so concerned with having the invisibility of it. Mono is far superior. When a fish comes up and bites it, especially in the fall and there's a lot of slack, I can't tell you how many times that fish gets twisted up in the line and you lose it because it just cuts through, or you bite it and you don't notice and it wraps around a piling. Trust me, when you have monofilament, it's going to save you so much heartache and you're going to land a lot more fish. So PE braided line, I'll do an Albright knot to usually a 10-15 pound leader of monofilament. From there, I'll usually do it to a clip onto the jig, or if I'm feeling really adventurous, I'll go from a swivel to a clip onto the jig. And the reason I run the clip is because that way I can change the jig out. We'll talk about that with the jig theory portion at the end, switching jigs out and stuff, but I want to be able to change jigs quickly, and I don't want to have to retie a knot every time I do it. Now we talked about line, braided PE line, and monofilament, and we talked about the connection points. Now, when it comes to the rod, You guys see it a lot in my videos. I use the really specific, super parabolic rods. You know, they got a lot of bend to them. They're super noodly. Really don't want to use those when you're fishing the structure and you're fishing the pilings near the boats and stuff like that. You actually want a rod that's got a little bit more backbone. I've been using the Phoenix M1 inshore, the lightest one that they make. It's done really well for me. A lot of people I know are using crankbait rods, seem to work really well. Basically, you want something that's got a good parabolic bend, but it also has enough backbone, because when you get the bite, you want to be able to pull the fish away from the structure. So dedicated slow pitch rods are great, you know, when you're fishing tuna and rockfish, when you're out in the open, but when you're coming up to structure, you want something with a little more backbone. All right guys, now the exciting part. I'm gonna go out to the water. I'm gonna show you guys exactly how we do it. I'm gonna show you what I look for, where I drop it, how I drop it, and just show you how it's done. See you guys on the water. So when I approach a dock, say I'm facing it, I want to hit the right hand side. Give it a few pops. Nothing's there. I'm going to go right down the front of it. Give it a few pops, nothing. Now as I'm leaving it, I'm going to pitch the back of it one more time before I move on to the next one. Hold it open, just give it a little pitch. And just give it a pitch, pendulum swing it. Give it a few pops. There's nothing there. Then I hit the next one, same thing. I try to go 3 shots. Sometimes if there's a boat in front of it, you know, parked up tight, you're just going to get 2 swings at it. But before you pitch the right side of the pylon, you want to make sure you haven't passed it yet, because once you pass it, you're going to drag your line in the front. And if you get bit, or you just even go to retrieve your line, you're going to get snagged, you're going to get cut off, you're going to lose your lure or your line. So you want to be fishing ahead of it. Nothing there. I'll just try the front again. Let it flutter down, see how it's coming off of there. Give it a few pops, maybe 2 or 3, otherwise there's nothing there. So the technique I like to use is open it up, and I'll take my right hand or your left hand, and I just hold it tight. When I'm ready to go, I just let it fly. See that line coming off the bail? That's getting me the flutter that I want. Once it hits, put it in, give it a couple pops, move on. I'm going to do this just for all the pilings. Look at this big old beast. How to follow her, how to chase her. I don't know if that was a mackerel or what, probably. Man, slam that thing. Holy smoke. Drag a little bit. Oh yeah, that's a good one. Just knock my damn video over. This is a good one. Yeah, baby. Go fish on. That's what I like to see, baby. Ooh, big one. Still got 13. strength today. We'll count it. It's not spottyable. That's the best. Not that concerned. But normally I'd be netting everything, you know what I mean? Hopefully you guys enjoyed that on the water explanation. You know, that's just how I do it. It's some other things we can get into, but that's the basics. If you want to catch fish on these things, just follow the steps. I guarantee you'll get bit. Now, one of the most important things we have to think about is the jigs themselves. So we're talking about 20 gram and under in this case. Like I said, I'm going to talk about casting these things. In another video, I got footage where I've cast them out on the 40 grams and caught fish, you know, casting them out 100 yards and reeling them in and catching fish, halibut, different types of fish just out in the open. But that's really how I'm fishing these small things out in the docks. But one of the most important things is the jigs themselves. And one of the things a lot of people change is they just change the size, and they go from, you know, 20 gram to 30 gram to 15 to 10, or they change the color. That's typically the more likely scenario is people change the color. They go to pink, they go to blue, they go to the confetti, they go to the glow. But one of the most important things, and the secret I want to tell you guys, is to actually change the shape of the jig. And I think that's the most important thing. Now, the two jigs that we have, the Assassin and the Sumo, they're two completely different styles of jigs. They fall differently. The Assassin has it kind of helicopters and it wobbles, has a very erratic fall, and it takes a really long time to hit the bottom. I mean, it stays in the water column for a really long time. Where the Sumo has the heavier belly, and it's got slots in the bottom of it, and it'll actually slide. It slides and wobbles, and you can actually get under docks and get under pilings, but it's got less action. Drops a little faster and a little more action. So even though they're the same gram, so if I'm fishing 20 feet, I'm going to be fishing at 20 gram. I'll fish at 20 gram probably anywhere from 12 feet to like 30 feet. Now, if the bite's not happening and I'm using an Assassin, well, guess what? I'm going to switch to a Sumo. And if I'm fishing a Sumo and the Sumo's not working, I'll switch to an Assassin. So instead of just switching the color and staying with one jig, switch the profile of the jig and get a completely different action. And I think that's where a lot of people fail. They have one type of jig and then they keep fishing it, and if it's not working, it's not working. You can only change the color so much, and sometimes the color does have something to do with it, but you want to change the style. So change the color, change the shape, and then throughout the day, once you find the pattern, that's what you want to stick with. And sometimes that changes too, as the tide changes, as the pressure changes, as the sun goes down, the conditions change. Sometimes the bite's hot on a blue Sumo, and then it shuts off, and I'll switch to a pink Assassin, and suddenly the bite picks up again. Typically because it's giving, you know, a totally different reaction that the fish want. You know, in my live show, I talked about the lateral lines of the fish and how they can feel, you know, pressure. That stuff matters. So in conclusion, you can take some of the tips I use on the gear, go fish them how you want to fish them, and take that advice on the jigs, and I think you'll get bit. Again, it's just a starting point. There's many other different ways to do it. Some guys have different styles, and there's 100 different ways to fish these things. But just to get you guys started and how I fish them at tournaments a lot, I've been pretty successful with them. Give it a try, and I think you guys will have some success. Oos.